What they don't tell you about the 4% withdrawal rule. Imagine living 15 years into your retirement only to discover the financial strategy you've built. Everything on was designed for a world that no longer exists. That's exactly what happened to Michael, a former engineer who followed his advisor's recommendation to withdraw 4% from his nest egg each year. Now, at 80, he's watching his savings dwindle twice as fast as planned, with potentially 2 decades of life still ahead. The 4% rule has been sacred gospel in retirement planning since 1994, with millions of Americans basing their entire financial futures on it. But what if I told you this cornerstone strategy was created during economic conditions we may never see again? What if following this outdated rule could leave you with empty accounts while you still have years, even decades of life to fund? In the next few minutes, I'll reveal why this widely accepted formula is silently endangering retirements across America, and the 3 powerful alternatives that could extend your financial security by 10-15 years. One of these approaches helped Eleanor, a 72-year-old widow, transform her dwindling portfolio into one that will now outlive her even if she reaches 100. You and I both know that running out of money is the great unspoken fear that keeps retirees awake at night. You've done everything right, saved diligently, invested prudently, followed conventional wisdom. Perhaps you've carefully calculated how long your money will last using that 4% guideline everyone seems to recommend. But there's that nagging question: will it really be enough? With healthcare costs rising, inflation surging, and market volatility increasing, how can anyone truly know? Perhaps you've already felt that knot in your stomach when the market drops sharply. Maybe you've already found yourself spending less than you planned, haunted by the fear of outliving your savings. That tension between enjoying the retirement you've earned and preserving your financial security for an unknown future. It's a burden too many carry in silence. First story: Michael's rude awakening. Michael had done everything by the book. After 38 years as a structural engineer, he retired at 65 with $1.2 million in his portfolio. His financial advisor assured him that withdrawing $48,000 annually, 4% in that first year, then adjusted for inflation, would sustain him through retirement. The math seemed sound, the strategy time-tested. 15 years later, Michael's reality looks dramatically different. His portfolio, which should have been around $900,000 according to projections, has dwindled to just over $450,000. What went wrong? The advisor's calculations had been based on historical market returns from 1926 to 1976 unique period that included post-war economic expansion and record-breaking market performance. Today's economic landscape bears little resemblance to that golden era. Lower overall returns, higher volatility, extended bear markets, none of these modern realities factored into the original 4% rule. At 80, Michael now faces a devastating choice: drastically reduce his already modest lifestyle or risk running out of money entirely before he turns 90. The rule he trusted has failed him precisely when he's most vulnerable. But Michael's story takes an unexpected turn when he discovers something his original advisor never mentioned: critical adjustment to the withdrawal approach that would have protected his longevity. Second story: Eleanor's dynamic solution. Eleanor, a retired librarian, lost her husband Richard just 3 years into their retirement. At 72, she found herself solely responsible for financial decisions for the first time in her life. With $850,000 remaining in their joint investments, Eleanor continued the 4% withdrawal strategy their advisor had recommended. But something didn't feel right. After 2 years of steep market declines, continuing to withdraw the same inflation-adjusted amount seemed counterintuitive. Why take out the same dollar figure from a significantly smaller pot? It defied common sense. Against her advisor's reassurances, Eleanor sought a second opinion. The new financial planner introduced her to something called a dynamic withdrawal strategy, where withdrawal rates adjust based on market performance and remaining portfolio balance. In good years, Eleanor would take a bit more. In down years, she'd tighten her belt slightly. This simple shift in approach completely transformed her financial trajectory. Instead of her money potentially running out by age 92, new projections showed her adjusted strategy could sustain her beyond 100 while still providing 90% of her original planned income. What astounded Eleanor most wasn't just the mathematical improvement, it was that no one had ever presented this obvious alternative before. But there was another approach, even more powerful for certain retirees, that she would soon discover. Third story: Robert and Julia's bucket breakthrough. Robert and Julia, both former teachers, had accumulated $1.1 million for retirement. Following the standard advice, they began withdrawing their 4% annually, pleased with their $44,000 supplement to their teacher pensions. 3 years into retirement, the market crashed. Their advisor urged them to stay the course with the 4% rule. But watching their portfolio shrink by nearly 30%, while continuing to withdraw the same amount, felt like bailing water into a leaking boat rather than out of it. At their local library, Robert attended a retirement workshop where he learned about the bucket strategy, dividing assets into 3 time horizon categories: immediate needs, cash; mid-term needs, conservative investments; and long-term growth. This approach meant they would never be forced to sell investments during market downturns to fund their lifestyle. When they implemented this strategy, something remarkable happened. Not only did their anxiety about market fluctuations virtually disappear, but their portfolio actually began to recover more quickly. They weren't depleting assets at depreciated values, as a critical mistake the standard 4% rule often forces retirees to make. 5 years later, despite another market correction, Robert and Julia's adjusted approach had preserved nearly $120,000 more than their original strategy would have. But what surprised them most was discovering they could have combined this approach with yet another strategy for even greater security. Fourth story: Thomas's income floor revolution. Thomas had worked for decades as a dentist, building a substantial nest egg of $1.8 million. A trusted client had recommended the 4% withdrawal strategy, which would give Thomas $72,000 annually, a comfortable supplement to his Social Security. But Thomas had lived through enough economic cycles to be skeptical of any one-size-fits-all approach. After researching alternatives, he discovered something called the essential income floor strategy, and it transformed his entire perspective on retirement security. Thomas calculated his essential monthly expenses: housing, utilities, food, healthcare, transportation, and insurance, totaling $4,500 monthly. Instead of withdrawing from a volatile investment portfolio for these predictable costs, he used a portion of his savings to purchase an immediate annuity that guaranteed this exact amount for life, regardless of market performance. This left his remaining investments free to grow untouched, except for discretionary spending, like travel and gifts. The psychological freedom was immediate. Market drops no longer threatened his ability to cover essential needs. He could invest his remaining assets more aggressively for long-term growth because his basics were guaranteed. 10 years into retirement, while friends following the 4% rule were cutting back due to portfolio depletion, Thomas's guaranteed income continued unchanged. Even more remarkably, his remaining investment portfolio had grown substantially, providing an additional layer of security he hadn't even anticipated. These stories reveal three profound truths about retirement planning that often go unspoken. First, financial rules of thumb are products of their time, created under specific economic conditions that inevitably change. What worked brilliantly in one era may quietly become dangerous in another. Second, financial security in retirement isn't just about the size of your nest egg, it's about the strategy you use to convert that nest egg into sustainable income. Two retirees with identical savings following different withdrawal approaches might have dramatically different outcomes spanning decades. Third, perhaps most importantly, is the profound psychological effect of financial uncertainty in our later years. The traditional 4% approach often creates an invisible burden of anxiety, a nagging fear that any market downturn could permanently derail your security precisely when you're most vulnerable. But this brings us to an essential question. If the conventional wisdom that millions rely on is fundamentally flawed, why do financial professionals continue recommending it? And what would happen if we approached retirement income less as a mathematical formula and more as an individualized strategy aligned with how life actually unfolds? Here's the insight that changed everything for Michael, Eleanor, Robert, Julia, and Thomas. The 4% rule was never intended to be a universal prescription. Its creator, financial advisor William Bengen, designed it as a worst-case scenario baseline for a specific type of portfolio during specific economic conditions, not as the one-size-fits-all approach it has become. The deeply human reality of retirement is that it unfolds over decades through changing economic environments, personal circumstances, and needs. No single, rigid formula can possibly accommodate the beautiful complexity of a multi-decade retirement journey. What if instead of asking, "How much can I safely withdraw?" we asked a fundamentally different question? How can I create income that adapts to both the markets and my evolving life, providing security without unnecessary sacrifice? Perhaps true retirement wisdom isn't about finding the perfect formula at all. Maybe it's about creating a financial strategy as flexible and resilient as you've become through decades of life experience. Just as you've weathered countless changes throughout your working years, adapting, adjusting, and finding new paths forward, your retirement income approach can embody that same adaptability. The most secure retirements aren't built on rigid rules, but on thoughtful strategies that breathe with the rhythms of both markets and life. Your retirement savings isn't just a number to be mathematically depleted over time. It's the financial embodiment of everything you've built, a resource to be shepherded with the same wisdom and care you've developed throughout your entire life journey. As you reflect on your own retirement strategy, Remember that questioning conventional wisdom isn't being difficult, it's being prudent. The courage to ask, "Is there a better way?" has likely served you well throughout your life. That same courage will serve you equally well now. Your retirement deserves a strategy as unique and thoughtful as the life you've built. Not a rule created for anonymous masses, but an approach crafted for your specific needs, dreams, and circumstances. You've earned not just your savings, but the peace of mind that comes from knowing those resources are being managed with the thoughtfulness they deserve. May your retirement be funded not just adequately, but abundantly, with strategies wise enough to weather whatever changes the coming decades may bring. And next time, discover why the retirement tax bomb catches even the most prepared retirees by surprise, and the 5 legal strategies that could save you tens of thousands in unnecessary payments to the IRS.